2012 was a tumultuous year in the Middle East. In the war in Syria, new estimates suggest at least 60,000 people have died since the conflict began in early 2011.
Lebanon's capital, Beirut, has seen the same kind of internal strife. 15 years of civil war left Beirut a bombed-out, pock-marked city in the early 1990s. But some 20 years later, Beirut is back. VOA's correspondent James Brooke talks about the city's renaissance with On Assignment's Doug Bernard.
Damascus 2012? No, this is Beirut 1990. Only 20 years ago, Beirut was in ruins after a long civil war. But the rebirth of Beirut shows how cities can bounce back. Today, Beirut's old Holiday Inn reminds visitors how gun battles once raged along the Green Line that divided Muslim West from Christian East. One generation later, street life is back to normal. Beirut has been largely rebuilt.
James Brooke, you documented a remarkable resurgence that's occurring in Beirut right now. What do you attribute to this city's resilience?
It's partly location. It's a super location overlooking the Eastern Mediterranean. Some people call it the Rio de Janeiro of the Middle East. Lovely corniche is the boulevard that goes alongside the Mediterranean Sea. Sweeping views, fresh air, and nice people when they're not shooting each other. Oliver Martin Robinson, a British analyst here, watches as high-rises sprout up.
There's a big boom in Lebanon of building, and it's been going on for quite a while. This is generally focused on luxury properties, often luxury office space as well in downtown.
If we were to go to Beirut today, is that what we'd really be seeing, like a modern, Western-looking city?
Doug, yes, it was a real shock for me. It was my first trip to Beirut, and I carried in my head all the images of the war and the destruction and the shell-pocked buildings. When I got there, I was just swept away. And there's been a huge amount of reconstruction, new shops, new high-rises, and it keeps going. You could say the city bird is the building crane.
So with fewer of these physical scars remaining, not so many of the buildings with the bullet holes and then that sort of thing, are memories starting to fade as well about what happened just several decades ago?
I think memories are starting to fade. The Lebanese are very agile, very entrepreneurial. They've got a knack for bouncing back. And once again, we outsiders, we carry in our heads the images of 15 years of civil war, but the Civil War was over 20 years ago in 1990, a generation ago. So the time has moved on.
So now this is a place that's, seen human habitation for thousands of years. If I were to walk the streets of Beirut, how much of evidence do I see of those many thousands of years of human activity there?
Well, in some cases, the destruction unveiled, in the case of downtown, a Roman bath that goes back 2,000 years. In other cases, the rebuilding has been so fast. I did a Walk Beirut tour, and our guide deliberately sought out these wonderful old buildings, but they're few and far between. Ronnie Chata leads Walk Beirut, a city tour. He has a hard time finding buildings from the Ottoman and French colonial periods of a century ago.
There are pockets within Beirut. They're called traditional quarters. There's some belated preservation. There isn't much of it. I think reconstruction, or at least redevelopment, took precedence over restoration. And I think at a loss to Beirut's history, or at least its architectural history.
So what kind of buildings are going up? I mean, are these shops, are these businesses, are these apartments? And who's behind all this?
Well, a lot of them are high-rise offices and apartment buildings, and they're built for what they call the Gulfies, the people from the Persian Gulf who have a lot of money. The Gulfies really just come in and spend money, and so it's rather bizarre. You see all these ultra-high-end shops that the average American or Lebanese could not really go into and buy anything, and they're really designed for this very high-end tourism coming up from the Emirate States, which is not happening now. The problem this season is because of the violence in Syria and a little bit of violence spilling over into Lebanon, the Gulfies are not coming. So when I was there, I had the hotel pool all to myself. The shops were empty. Shops were actually closing. But there are hotels and condos and apartments that are filling up. So there's a lot of life there.
Our thanks again to our Moscow correspondent James Brooke, who talked to us from our VOA bureau in New York.